Block Podcast, where we cut through the noise and keep it real. Just because a cut block is legal doesn't make it right. Kind of like Cory Hogue's takes. Now, here's your host, Cory Hogue.
Thank you, Jesse, and welcome to the Cut Block Podcast. This week, we're cutting through the noise and getting real about a potential new private entity managing the FCS playoffs. And we're going to head into the Gridiron Briefing Room, where senior FCS analyst for Hero Sports FCS, top 25 voter, and a writer for Bet MGM, Sam Herder, joins me to discuss his reporting last week about the FCS potentially moving to a model that more closely resembles the college football playoff. Is a private entity investing in and operating the FCS playoffs actually a positive? We're going to discuss that and ask Sam to give us a view on where FCS teams fit in the national picture this year. And of course, closing things out with the weekend warm up. It's my personal viewing schedule for the weekend. My name is Cory Hogue, proprietor of CoryHogueSports.substack.com. You can find me on any social media channel that you enjoy at Cory Hogue Sports. It's all one word, CoryHogue Sports. I'm most active on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and review this podcast wherever you listen. It truly makes a difference. And you can find every episode on our homepage, thecutblock.podbean.com. It's time to head into the trenches, and the FCS playoffs are one of the best things in college football. 34 teams fight it out for a true national champion on the field. But there's a problem that's been hiding in plain sight for years. It's money. It's a common problem. Right now, the NCAA runs the FCS playoffs. That means they control the purse strings. Schools that host playoff games are required to pay significant hosting fees up front. And the NCAA keeps most of the revenue from ticket sales. The result? Hosting a playoff game often turns into a financial loss for the very teams who've earned the right to play at home. Think about that. Winning on the field can actually cost you off it. Now, new pitches on the table, and it doesn't come from the NCAA. There's a private equity firms, yes, the same kind of big money investors who move in on pro sports are eyeing the FCS playoffs. They believe the postseason is undervalued. Their argument is simple. TV ratings for FCS playoff games are strong. There's a loyal fan base, but the financial model is broken. The NCAA isn't maximizing sponsorships, media rights, or even ticket sales. So what is the new proposal? Move the FCS playoffs out of NCAA control and into the hands of a new private entity. Think of it like the college football playoff at the FBS level. The investors would handle the business side, media rights, sponsorships, revenue distribution. Schools and conferences would, in theory, see bigger checks. And most importantly, hosting a playoff game wouldn't be a punishment on your budget. On the surface, sounds like a win. But it does raise big questions. First, control. Who's calling the shots under this model? If private investors are running the playoffs, does that mean conferences and schools have less say in how the postseason is structured? Second, priorities. Investors are in this to make money. That doesn't always line up with the mission of college athletics, which is supposed to put student athletes first. Then there's the issue of access. Would a private model still guarantee wide participation across all conferences? Or would it slowly tilt toward the programs with the biggest followings? Think North Dakota State. The ones that deliver the best TV numbers. Montana State. If money becomes the driver, history tells us inclusivity usually takes a back seat. But here's the other side. Schools and conferences are bleeding cash under the current setup. If private money can stabilize the postseason and make it profitable, maybe that's the trade-off the FCS has to consider. This is a fork in the road for the FCS. Stay with the NCAA and a playoff model that's financially broken, or roll the dice with private equity promising more money and more exposure. Either way, this is not a small decision. It's one that could reshape the future of FCS football and maybe even set the stage for other NCAA championships to follow. So here's the question that lingers. Is this about protecting the tradition and spirit of the FCS playoffs? Or is it time to acknowledge the business side and give the game a financial backbone it desperately needs? We're going to discuss all that and more with Sam Herder coming up soon. But first, the Cut Block Podcast is listener supported. And if you have the means, I'd be honored to have you as a paying subscriber over at CoryHogueSports.substack.com. Paid subscribers get every story delivered right to their inbox. Annual subscribers get 6 months free. And founding members, I like to call them all-stars, receive early access to post, plus my undying love and gratitude. It's time to head into the Gridiron Briefing Room, where I am joined by the senior FCS analyst for Hero Sports FCS. He's a top FCS top 25 voter and a writer for BetMGM, Sam Herder. Sam, I really appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me.
You bet. Well, this week we're talking about your reporting from last week about the FCS playoffs potentially being operated by a venture capitalist firm. So let's start with exactly what are these private equity groups are proposing? Is it a full takeover or more of a partnership with the NCAA?
So it is more of a partnership, I would say, and this group is called Sequence Equity, which is founded by a couple of Ivy League alums. I believe one or both of them played football for Princeton, and the pitch from them to FCS commissioners last week was to take the FCS playoffs outside of the NCAA postseason umbrella and run it as its own private entity. And the private entity itself would actually be owned by FCS conferences, and then Sequence Equity would have a minority stake in this new entity. And for those that are wondering, like, how would you do this? How could you just take the FCS playoffs out of the NCAA? It's the same exact concept as the college football playoff, right? The FBS postseason bracket is not owned or operated by the NCAA. It's its own LLC owned by Notre Dame and every FBS conference. And so that is how it would work. The ins and outs of how do you pull this out from the NCAA? What about the TV deal? Like what would the bracket structure look like? Those are all conversations that still need to be determined and still need to be had, frankly. But last week's meeting was simply just the pitch from Sequence Equity to FCS commissioners of what we want to do. And for those wondering why they would want to do this, they view the FCS playoffs as an entity that is very, very valuable with, some of the home crowds you see in the later rounds of the playoffs, and also the TV ratings that the FCS playoffs gets, which is really, really good TV ratings. And then they see how it's monetized by the NCAA, and they go, we could not only inject reportedly tens of millions of dollars into this, but you guys will no longer be handcuffed by the NCAA, where you get to keep more of the TV revenue. You get to negotiate a better TV deal, and you get to have better sponsors for the FCS playoffs and the FCS championship game, where now the FCS conferences really can't negotiate that because that's all handled by the NCAA. And the advertising package for NCAA tournaments is you're kind of handcuffed on what you can do there. So overall, I think there's definitely some pros and cons to this, but there's also pros and cons to staying with the status quo of staying under the NCAA.
Yeah, and one of the things that really I find intriguing about this is right now FCS is truly the only Division I football championship in the NCAA. This would pretty much mean there's no actual NCAA champion every year, right?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, the FCS champion is technically considered the NCAA Division I national champion. Now, if this were to go, if the FCS playoffs were to kind of go private and not be under the NCAA, kind of body or under the NCAA umbrella as far as postseason tournaments. Those are questions I ask. Like, could this still be called the FCS National Championship or the FCS Playoffs, or does the NCAA own the letters, FCS, and you would have to call it, championship football, national like I don't know. Those are questions that still need to be determined. But it would pretty much mean that the NCAA doesn't necessarily sponsor a Division I national champion. And this could be the next conversation to be had is with the NCAA commissioners to meet up with the NCAA and say, like, this is what we learned. We're somewhat interested in this. Maybe we're not. Like, it's still kind of in the growing phases. But if we were to move forward, how would this look from the NCAA perspective? Would the NCAA be willing to hand this off to a third party to run and operate? I'm sure if they did, there would be some type of guarantee because the FCS playoffs are a part of the NCAA kind of bundle TV package that they have with ESPN that involves volleyball and baseball, softball, women's basketball. The FCS playoffs are a key part of that. And so there is value in the FCS playoffs that the NCAA has. And if they were to hand this off, I'm guessing there would be some sort of guarantee. They're not just going to hand it off willy-nilly. They would want something in return.
Definitely. Now, it's my understanding that schools that host in FCS playoffs lose money on these games, on these home games. Is that something that maybe this forces, if the NCAA wants to keep it under their umbrella, maybe this forces them to share more of that money with those schools?
Yeah, I think it's a mixed bag as far as how the FCS playoffs currently works, and if you make money or if you lose money. I mean, certainly right now with the setup is you have to bid to host a playoff game. So even if you're the number one seed, you have to bid to host in the quarterfinals is like $80,000 or whatever the case may be. You also have to give 85% of your ticket revenue to the NCAA because it's not a home event technically for NDSU to host Mercer. It's an NCAA event, and so they have to fork over 85% of their ticket revenue. So if you combine the bid you have to make plus the ticket revenue that you have to split. If you don't sell enough tickets, there is a chance that you could lose money hosting games, and that happens most of the time where you actually lose money hosting these games. But there are other ways to make money off of the playoffs in this current setup. I know South Dakota State had a good story of, there isn't some like, we won the national championship 2 years ago. We got $1 million paycheck for that. Like, that doesn't happen, but they sold more season tickets the next year. They sold out of all of their suites. They got more traffic to their university website by winning the national championship. They got better corporate sponsors by winning the national championship. And so you can make money going on long playoff runs, but you need to have that fan support. Like if you're a UIW, I mean, if you go on a national championship run and you have to bid to host 3 playoff games, like if you're UIW, you're probably going to lose money doing that. And I know for commissioners and ADs, that doesn't sit right with them. Like that shouldn't be the case. And so with this new potential structure, and you get more money invested into it, you get a better TV deal. There's a chance that you get to keep your ticket revenue. And if you're Montana State and you host 3 playoff games and you get to keep most or all of that ticket revenue, that's $3 million more. That's a great chunk of change for a mid-major athletic department. So that's why I think this is enticing. It's not just people look at private equity injecting a bunch of money into this, and I get that that's kind of like, but it goes far beyond that. It's the ability to get better sponsorships. It's ability to get a better TV deal, and it's an ability to actually make money off of your postseason success rather than, hey, we went to the national championship and guess what? We lost $250,000 because we had to host a bunch of playoff games and that cost us money.
Yeah, it's easy to see why they're interested in this, but are there concerns that commissioners and ADs have about giving control of the playoffs to outside investors?
Yeah, I definitely think there is that concern, and that's why, Big Sky Commissioner Tom Wistersill told me, like, they're going to tread very lightly or tread very carefully on, going down this path. And they're interested and intrigued enough to take this to the NCAA and keep the conversation going. But this is a long ways from going final, right? I mean, the commissioners have to talk amongst themselves. Each conference has to talk amongst themselves. as far as the ADs and presidents and how interested they are in this. And you have to have conversations with the NCAA, conversations with ESPN. And so I think there is excitement to this, but I don't really get a sense whether this is going to cross the finish line or not cross the finish line. But there definitely are, some cons and concerns with this. I do think one thing that is at least a little bit reassuring is this isn't necessarily handing off the FCS playoffs to this private equity firm and saying, all right, it's all yours, because the FCS conferences would have ownership over this, and the FCS conferences would have the ability to determine what type of bracket they want to do, what type of structure they want to do. Now, with that said, like, let's not be naive here. The sequence equity, the reason they're doing this is because they expect to have a return on investment, right? They're not just doing this for charity and saying, yeah, we're going to do this great thing for the FCS because we love the FCS. Like, no, they see a product that they think can make money, that they think can make them money, along with the FCS conferences making money and the FCS teams making money. So to me, I feel like it's this wholesale of everyone can benefit from this. I know private equity can be a concern, and you hear really bad stories of private equity buying a product and stripping it down just so they can make an easy buck. I don't necessarily feel like this would happen in this, but there is that concern of, like, do we really want to go down this path of private equity money? And it's all sunshine and roses right now, but when it gets down to it, are they going to make demands to say, no, we want to do this? And the FCS commissioners would say, well, you told us we could do this in the pitch. They're like, well, we crunched the numbers and we want to do this now. Like, I don't know, something like that could happen. So there's pros and cons to everything, and there's definitely pros and cons to this.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I'm talking with Sam Herder, senior FCS analyst for Hero Sports FCS, top 25 voter, also writes for Bet MGM. So you mentioned kind of roughly timeline. What, in your opinion, because no one is plugged in more than you are to the FCS, especially from a national pitcher, what kind of timeline are we looking at? Is this like 5 years down the road, or is this something that could be maybe a little more near term?
I think there isn't necessarily, like, I haven't heard like a specific date of when this would launch, because, again, there's a lot of conversations to be had. I feel like 2028 could be the most realistic if this were to go through. Potentially 2027, but that's only 2 years away. And when you think of all the things that need to happen, from pulling this out from the NCAA and securing the TV deal, and this new entity would need to have some staff on it, right? Whether it's media relations, or whether it's just operating the budget, or someone that's staff that is trying to get deals or sponsorships, I should say. And so plus you have to figure out what type of format you're going to do. So there's a lot of that goes into this. So I would expect if it were to actually launch, it probably wouldn't be for another few years. And I don't even know like what the timetable would be to like put the final stamp of approval, like, okay, this is going to go through. Like it could take another year for this to really cross the finish line and say, okay, we're moving forward with this. Or in 3 months, I could hear the commissioners say, you know what, it was really exciting, we made some progress on it, but at the end of the day, it was too much of a risk for us, and we're comfortable with being under the NCAA. And so we eventually told them thanks or no thanks. Like, that could happen in 3 months, or in a year from now, we could hear that there's a new FCS playoffs that's going to hit in a couple of years. I really don't know just yet on the exact timeline.
Well, pulling it out from the NCAA and the TV package has an effect on Division II and Division III schools as well. So there's far-reaching effects for this that obviously they've got to consider, and they know all that stuff far better than I do, no doubt. Is there some concern that if they go this route with the private equity, that they're going to want more of the money-making schools, the bigger schools, like, say, right now, we see it in college football playoff. Yeah, you've got the Southeastern Conference, Big Ten fighting for more seats at the table. Is that a concern for commissioners right now as well?
Yeah, I think that could be a fair concern, but we already kind of see that right now. I mean, there's kind of the sneaky suspicion that there's some weird things going on behind the in the room behind closed curtains, as far as how, the NCAA, I mean, they want return on investment as well with where things sit right now. And, there are examples of like a blue blood team like Montana getting to host a playoff game when, sometimes in the past, maybe they didn't deserve to host a playoff game. But all of a sudden you find out that, hey, their first round game is going to be at night on ESPN2. You go, okay, well, that makes a little sense that, maybe ESPN or the NCAA kind of nudged the committee that say, hey, we want Montana to host a first round game because, that's going to make us a couple more bucks. So I already think maybe that's going on a little bit. That's more conspiracy theory than like someone actually tells me like that has happened. Like no one's told me that stuff like that happens, but you can kind of read between the lines on some of the decisions. So we already see that already, but certainly when there's more money at stake, I could certainly see a reason of why, the private equity would push for more brand names to, get into the playoffs. But at the same time, like how much would that really move the needle? Like if you think about it, let's say it's between, the last team to get in is between Southern Illinois and, third place Lamar. Like, is Southern Illinois like really going to move the needle a lot? Like, we're going to make more money putting the Salukis in over Lamar. Like, I don't know. We're not talking huge brand names here when it comes to the FCS. Most of the time, Montana State, North Dakota State, South Dakota State, probably Tarleton State, like those teams are already probably going to be comfortably in. So I don't envision like a controversial, Montana got in and they're 6-6. Like, something fishy was happening. So I don't know. There isn't like that many brand names in the FCS compared to the FBS where like Alabama gets in because they're Alabama.
Yeah. Well, I know Southland Conference Commissioner Chris Grant would love to have a two bid. And, I think they're close as well. I do want to ask you about kind of a national picture because we were talking before we started recording about how many solid Texas FCS teams there are this year. You mentioned Lamar, you mentioned Tarleton, there's Abilene Christian there. And then one of the best stories this year is down in the Valley with UTRGV in that home stadium they have there at Vacker. Already one of the best home field advantages, at least in this part of FCS. How do the best Texas teams, though, like Tarleton, maybe UIW, Abilene Christian, those teams, how do they compare to those national favorites like a North Dakota State and a Montana?
Yeah, it's always the really intriguing conversation with, like, sometimes I'll go on radio shows in different regions and most of their focus is on the FBS, but they like to talk FCS every now and then. And they always have the question of, like, there's a lot of FCS teams in Texas and Louisiana, but yet the powers are in the Dakotas and the Montanas. Like, how does that work? And I think the location actually helps these teams because Montana and Montana State, I mean, those are the programs there. Like, yes, people support them like they're the NFL team. Same thing with South Dakota State and North Dakota State. And so you have the internal support where, like, that is the crown jewel of their athletic departments, and you have the external support where everyone wants to be sponsors for these teams because they are the top football teams in the state. So I do think having that regionality and being in more rural states helps. At the same time, though, like, being in Texas, even if there are a bunch of colleges in Texas, there is still so much talent there that you could really strike gold. And some of it is getting really good players out of high school, because I do think with the FBS putting more scholarship money toward transfers, that has left the FCS to be able to recruit higher end talents in all corners of the country. And there's also instances too of, a prospect that grew up in Texas and, maybe they went to wherever, Kansas State, because that's a Power 4 school and they got a scholarship offer, but they're a redshirt sophomore, they're not playing, and they hit the transfer portal and they come back to Abilene or UIW, Tarleton, because they're from that area, and they go there and they make a great impact. So I do look at a program like Tarleton State where they take football seriously. They have the budget, they have the support, they have the facilities to really make a dent into the national picture. UTRGV, I think, has massive potential. We've seen Abilene Christian rise pretty rapidly. They're relatively new to FCS. UIW is also, like, relatively new.
Yeah.
Yeah, like when you think of the the grand scheme of things, like they're pretty new to the FCS actually. And they've been on the national radar for several years now. There is just a different level, and I think trenches really separates the Dakota powers and the Montana powers. There's just something about those schools and how they're able to recruit offensive linemen, defensive linemen, and develop them. And a lot of these guys are small town farmers that grew up in the Dakotas and grew up in Montana. And, they're 6'6", 220-pound prospects coming out of high school. And by the time they're a senior, they're NFL draft prospects. And there's just that ability to recruit and develop that type of talent where if you're in the Southeast and you have a really good offensive lineman, it's tougher to hang on to those guys because the Power Four is going to come in and swoop in and take them. Meanwhile, if you're from South Dakota or North Dakota or Montana, like there's a lot of those guys that have gotten huge offers from the Power Four, but they're sitting there going, like, no, I'm good. Like, I like where I'm at. I'm playing close to family. Like, I can get to the NFL from here. Like, I don't need to take $500,000 to go play at Alabama when I can just be at North Dakota State and make $60,000 and be an NFL draft prospect and be a draft pick and make $1 million in the long run. So that the trenches is really the separator for the top teams.
You're spot on. Every coach I talked to in the offseason, Todd Whitten, Clint Killow, they tell me it is those trenches. Keith Patterson as well. That's where it is. The other thing I find interesting is since the national title game moved to Frisco, I covered it last year. There was no Texas team in it, but there was a big Texas high school football flair in there because of these North Dakota States. They come get some of these skill players now. So that as well has helped them too. One last question before I'm going to get out of here with you. I really appreciate you being on. Is there any team that can truly challenge North Dakota State this season?
Oh yeah, I think there are a couple. I think South Dakota State is definitely going to be in that mix. I've really been impressed with the Jackrabbits. I think both Montana schools have potential as well. The Grizz already have a couple of ranked wins, and we saw Montana State go toe-to-toe, and it was every bit as good as South Dakota State earlier this year. They just came up a little bit short in double overtime. So I do think, while NDSU to me is like if you said, all right, Sam, 3 seconds, pick a national title winner, even odds, you have to put $100 on it. Like I would say NDSU instantly, but I don't necessarily think this is 2018 NDSU or 2023 South Dakota State where it's them versus the field. And if anyone knocks them off, it'd be a surprise. Like I do think NDSU is the favorite, but I wouldn't be surprised to see South Dakota State win it all this year. I wouldn't be surprised to see one of the Montana schools win it all this year. And I think Tarleton State is in that conversation as well. There's always that team that bubbles up to contend with those top teams. It was UIW, a few years ago. It was Furman and UAlbany a couple of years ago that rose up and challenged those schools. But the difficulty is like actually knocking them off. Like there's one thing if you're a UIW and you went to NDSU and you nearly won, or you're Furman, you went to Montana and you nearly won. Like, yeah, that's great. But at some point, like someone has to knock one of these teams off. And it's difficult to do because most of the time you have to do it on the road. And so if Tarleton State can go undefeated and maybe they get a top 2 seed and they host Montana instead of having to go to Montana, then maybe that's how someone other than a Dakota or a Montana school gets into the national title. And then once you're there, you never know what can happen. But there's just something about the playoffs where it seems like NDSU, South Dakota State, Montana, like those sort of schools that have really good depth, it seems like they're peaking in December because they have so much depth where they stay a little bit fresh. Meanwhile, some other teams and pastures have started really hot, but then they get dinged up. They have some key injuries there, and their number 2s are a huge drop off, and they're not playing their best football in December. Meanwhile, NDSU and these other powers, like they're peaking at the right time. So you have to be able to build out that depth. And I do think Tarleton is a team, from what I've seen defensively, they're playing a lot of guys, and there's not much of a noticeable drop off when they go to their number 2. So I think that is promising for a team like Tarleton to compete deep in the playoffs with these powers.
That has been a focus for the Texans, over the last couple of years. I'm just glad to know that there's at least a chance. You saying there's a chance, that keeps me excited. Sam Herder, tell everyone where we can find you. I may have missed a couple because you are so in tune with FCS, and I really appreciate you coming on here today.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And yeah, our website is herosports.com. I'm on Twitter at Sam Herder. FCS, and yeah, you can find all the FCS national coverage out there. We try to cover things as best as possible. We definitely take an approach of kind of big picture approach of what impacts the playoffs, what impacts the national title picture, and all of that. And I'm certainly one that you don't cheer or root for. You don't cheer for or cheer against any one team, but I've been pretty vocal to saying like the top heaviness of the FCS isn't a good thing. Like a good thing if North Dakota State wins 3 of the next 5 national titles and South Dakota State wins the other 2. Like you'd like to see teams in other regions step up and challenge. And so I do think there is, excitement that Tarleton State, like that's a new name. And as long as they're in the FCS, like maybe they could rise up and challenge. So I do think that is exciting to see some teams in different regions step up and potentially challenge some of these other top teams.
Well, that is all I have for today, but thank you so much. And maybe we can get you on here as playoffs come, and we'll see kind of how things stack up there. He's a must follow. If you're an FCS fan in the state of Texas, Sam Herder is a must follow. You will know what's going on nationally in the FCS. Thank you so much again, Sam.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Stay connected with me on Twitter, X, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and more. Just search at Cory Hogue Sports, CoryHogue Sports. Also, you can reach me directly by email at CoryHogueSports@gmail.com. It's time to get into the weekend warm-up. It's your guide through the battles that matter most across Texas non-FBS football. Let's lock in on some of the matchups that I'll be tracking closely this Saturday, and we start 1,300 hours on the ETBU Plus network through their athletics website. It's Mary Hardin Baylor at East Texas Baptist. Conference play begins in Division III, and the spotlight is on Belton and Marshall, Texas. UMHB is 2-2 and coming off back-to-back losses, but those came against perennial D3 powerhouse Wisconsin Whitewater and a Division II opponent with scholarships to give that's also possibly even a playoff team in their region this year. ETBU, they enter undefeated at 4-0, including a narrow 24-21 win over Texas Lutheran last week. History has not been kind to the Tigers. Their last win over the Crusaders was in 2003. That's 22 years ago. For the Crew, they got to find a consistent ground attack, and that's going to be the key to easing pressure on the quarterback. For ETBU, this is the stiffest competition they've seen yet. Also at 1,300 on Trinity's YouTube channel, you can see Southwestern at Trinity, another conference contest. And both these teams enter off a bye. Trinity is 3-0 and has allowed just 22 total points this season, led by a suffocating defense. Southern Athletic Association foe Southwestern is 2-1 with their lone loss, a last-second heartbreaker at home to Texas Lutheran. The Pirates' quarterback situation is worth watching. Jackson Sims was injured, but Jacob Smith stepped in and threw for 380 yards and 3 touchdowns while rushing for another 2 against TLU. Even so, Trinity has dominated the recent series, winning the last 2 games by a combined score of 91-14. Question is whether Southwestern can hang close long enough to have a shot late. At 1,400, we're headed to Abilene and a United Athletic Conference showdown between North Alabama and Abilene Christian. It's going to be broadcast on ESPN Plus. These teams meet for just the 4th time, with each team holding serve at home the past 2 seasons. The Lions got the best of the Wildcats 47-34 last season in Florence. ACU enters off a humbling 38-7 loss at UIW. It's their first defeat to an FCS opponent this year. And don't be fooled by UNA's 0-2 record against FCS competition. Both losses came on the road. A 9-point setback to Southeast Missouri, who was receiving votes, and then a double overtime heartbreaker last week on the road at top 5 Illinois State. For the Wildcats, this one is about responding. The defense was shredded last week, giving up over 300 yards on the ground and struggling to get off the field on 3rd and 4th down. With ranked opponents ahead in West Georgia, Southern Utah, Tarleton, ACU cannot afford to stumble here if they want to stay in the UAC title race or the FCS at-large playoff picture. At 1,500, it is a big-time Southland Conference matchup between Nichols and Lamar, also broadcast on ESPN+. Nichols and Lamar are squaring off for the 16th time, and the series has been very tight. Lamar leads overall 8-7. They've protected their home turf in recent meetings, while Nichols has usually handled business in Thibodaux. Lamar is undefeated against FCS competition and riding the momentum of a 35-32 thriller over Central Arkansas after building a big early lead last week. That's on top of their signature win over then number 4 South Dakota. The Colonels, meanwhile, they haven't found their footing since shocking UIW in week 1. They've dropped 4 straight games, including losses to ranked West Georgia and receiving votes Eastern Kentucky. Lamar's secondary was torched last week, and their third down offense has been rough. But they've made up for it in the red zone and by winning the turnover battle. Nichols needs answers on both sides of the ball to avoid a 5th straight loss. Also at 1,500, we head out to New Mexico Military Institute and the Wool Bowl, where Tyler visits the Broncos on TSBN Sports. Tyler has been dominant to start the season at 3-0, but they had a battle last week before pulling away from Northeastern Oklahoma A&M with 21 unanswered points in the fourth quarter. Nimi is coming off a bye after falling 34-21 at Blinn. Look, the Broncos have struggled at home in recent years. They're 4-7 since 2022, but the Wool Bowl can be a tricky place to play. In the SWJC FC, nothing comes easy. And if Tyler doesn't bring its best, the Broncos could make things uncomfortable in Roswell. Also, 1,500, another SWJC FC matchup. This time, Trinity Valley is at Blinn, also broadcast on TSBN Sports. And in this conference, the playoff race is always brutal. And this game could shape who gets in. Navarro and Tyler look like the front runners. That leaves 2 spots open for a crowded pack that includes both Trinity Valley and Blinn. There's 4 teams that fighting for 2 spots. The Cardinals come in rested after a bye, while Blinn needs to regroup from a 31-10 loss at Navarro, where penalties and mistakes piled up in the second half. Trinity Valley has shown they can be tough against the run. They shut down Cisco, but they struggled against Tyler's ground game. Blinn has been a bit up and down. They dominated Nimi in the ground attack, but getting overpowered by Navarro. Both sides have had issues with interceptions as well, so turnovers could swing the outcome. In a league where every week feels like a playoff elimination game, this one could be the difference between playing in the SWJC FC playoffs or staying home. And then we switch to the evening games, to the nighttime games, however you want to call it. It's 1,800 hours. We head back to San Antonio, where Stephen F. Austin visits the UIW Cardinals. This one broadcast on ESPN+, and this rivalry has been building some heat. Saturday marks the 9th meeting between the schools. Lumberjacks lead overall 5-3. But UIW made San Antonio a nightmare for opponents recently. And for the Jacks. Who can forget their unforgettable overtime playoff win in 2021 when, future NFL first-round draft pick Cameron Ward was the quarterback? That was his last victory for UIW, as a matter of fact. Last season, the Cardinals edged the Jacks 27-20 in Nacogdoches. SFA has rebounded from an 0-2 start with 3 straight wins, including their conference opener against McNeese. Cardinals come in off a dominant 38-7 win over ACU, pounding out 301 rushing yards. The challenge for SFA is winning away from Homer Bryce. They're just 3-11 on the road since the start of 2022. Meanwhile, UIW has turned Gale and Tom Benson Stadium into a fortress with 9 straight wins and 25 victories in their last 26 contests. The stakes couldn't be higher. SFA wants to prove their streak is real, while UIW can't afford to slip to 0-2 in Southland play. The action continues at 1800 in Stephenville, where Southern Utah visits Tarleton in another UAC showdown, also broadcast on ESPN+. But Tarleton's the best team in Texas right now. They're undefeated at 5-0, and they are just crushing folks. But Southern Utah is better than their 1-4 record shows. The Thunderbirds have faced 4 straight ranked opponents. They lost by just 3 to 2 of them. Losing 3 by just 3 points, including a 27-24 loss to West Georgia last week. This is a dangerous game for the Texans. They've had a bye week to rest and prepare, and they'll need to bring their A game because the Thunderbirds won't be rattled by the environment or the ranking. Also, 1800 hours. This could be the game of the week on Flow College. It is a Lone Star Conference showdown between 2 top 10 teams and one of the biggest Lone Star Conference games in recent years. UTPB comes in red hot, led by second-year head coach Chris McCullough, who won his 30th game before the age of 30. He is only the 4th coach in the history of college football to accomplish that feat. That's incredible. And the Falcons, look, last week they had a statement win over Midwestern State, and earlier they opened the season over then number 5 Central Oklahoma. But Angelo State and head coach Jeff Gersh, they're unbeaten as well. They've got quality wins and extra week. They're coming off extra rest, They're coming off a bye week. Statistically, these are 2 mirror images. UTPB averages 38.7 points per game. Angelo is at 39. Defensively, both are among the best in the nation. The difference so far has been turnovers. The Rams are +8. The Falcons are +3. The play of the quarterback might decide this one. Angelo State could get star quarterback, preseason LSC Offensive Player of the Year and reigning LSC Offensive Player of the Year, Braden Fuller back. Though backup Caden Smith has been steady as his replacement when he got injured. UTPB counters with Cannon Gibson, West Texas A&M transfer, and a Wink native who can beat you through the air and on the ground. This one feels destined to go the distance, and the winner takes a massive step towards the LSC title. And finally, 1900 hours, we head back to the Valley Rally. The Valley as Houston Christian visits UTRGV on ESPN+. Houston Christian had a bye week to regroup after 3 straight losses, including a narrow 26-23 defeat to Northern Colorado. They've been very competitive, and redshirt freshman running back Zyshawn Edwards has flashing playmaking ability. But the Vaqueros continue to prove that it belongs at this level, and they show fight in a 45-31 loss at Southeastern Louisiana. Quarterback Eddie Lee Marburger has been sharp. Robert and Janet Vacker Stadium is quickly becoming one of the best home field advantages in the FCS. Another sellout crowd is expected, and this atmosphere could give the Vaqueros the boost they need. That's your weekend war map. It's lots of great battles to watch this weekend. And I want to give a big thank you to everyone joining me for this episode of the Cut Block Podcast. I'll be back with another episode soon, bringing you more unfiltered truth and fearless football talk, if I can speak. Until then, stay safe. And remember, just because it's legal doesn't make it right. Just like my tapes.
Thank you for listening to the Cut Block Podcast with Cory Hogue. Remember, the cut block might be legal, but that doesn't make it right. Just like Cory Hogue's tapes.